listening to The Bradshaw Boys, a podcast where three relatively grown men binge the iconic HBO series Sex and the City. So dust off those DVDs and grab yourself a white wine or even a Cosmopolitan and settle in. Take it away, boys.
Welcome to the Bradshaw Boys, a podcast where three guys watch their way through Sex and the City for the first time ever, mostly. I'm Cory Cavin.
I'm Kevin James Doyle.
My name's Jon Sieber.
And today we have a very exciting guest. He is a creator. He is a publisher and a creative director. I already messed it up. He's a creative director, a publisher, and an editor. I got it.
Former editor of Out magazine.
And the guest editor currently at Playboy magazine.
Please welcome Kurt Osenlund, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I messed it up when I said creator, and I should have said creator.
Yeah, creator. Well, I do create things.
You do create things.
Yeah.
Overall, that's the entire job.
Yeah. Storyteller,
Yeah.
part-time podcaster.
I would say like you've worn a lot of hats. In a
Yes,
lot of
I
ways.
have. Yeah. And
totally.
I pride myself in that. However, it's interesting because New York, as you see in Sex and the City, is a city of specialty.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Kind of any person that does one thing creatively, you get dragged into like a lot of those things, in a good way.
right. Yeah, in a good way. But then it's suddenly like, well, what lane are you in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if I'm in all 5 lanes?
Right.
I 100% get that.
Yeah.
And I always think it's like the burden of the jack of all trades. And I think we live in like an interesting time because you see like comedians and people like Lena Dunham, where it's like, oh, she's a director and a writer and also create a show. And so you see people that can pull it off, but then there's also times where people are like, so what do you do?
Yeah.
And you're like, I do it all.
Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of things.
Yeah. So we talked about this right before we started, but you worked at Out magazine and were the editor of that, and you were recently the guest editor of Playboy.
Mm-hmm.
Season 3, they went to the Playboy mansion, and so we had some Playboy stuff on Sex and the City.
Ah, okay.
And so I feel like you've had a good experience with things that are Sex and the City adjacent. What's your actual relationship with Sex and the City? Have you seen the show? When did you start watching it?
I started watching it definitely when it was still airing live. Right around the time when I fell in love with The Sopranos, and that was the era when TV is better than movies kind of situation that we have now was nowhere near existing.
Yeah.
And I was always a movie guy, and when I watched The Sopranos, I was just like, what is that? Like, there's no TV like this.
Right.
And Sex and the City was kind of the phenomenon at the same time. So I think I latched onto it for a lot of reasons. A guy who wanted to live in New York, a gay guy, a Sarah Jessica Parker fan.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite story, personal story related to Sex and the City, is by the time the series wrapped, I really, really wanted the big, obnoxious, like pink velvet box set of the whole show.
Yes.
And my mom was like, well, because at this time I was like out, but not totally. And she's like, I can't get that and put it under the tree. Your dad's going to be like, he's going to freak out. And I was like, no, I was so spoiled. I was like, no, I have to have it. And she's like, well, what if I got you the individual? I'm like, no, I don't want the individual seasons and the acetate sleeves. I want the big pink velvet box that doesn't fit on a shelf. And one year it finally happened. There it was. And
Did your dad freak out?
No. I think he's a kind of brush it under the rug kind of guy. So I think he was just kind of like, oh, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Moves on to his whatever. But I still have it.
Still have it.
Yeah.
Where were you prior to New York City? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in like the suburbs of Philadelphia.
Okay.
I often say it's like that part of Bucks County where M. Night Shyamalan made movies when they were still good. But he would make it look like super, super rural. I mean, I grew up in, it wasn't that rural.
Yeah.
It did a pretty good job of masquerading the urban creep of the suburbia that I grew up in.
Yeah.
I've always heard about Bucks County Playhouse. Is that like a big deal for regional theater or something? I think in college I dated a girl. Maybe that's how I heard about it.
It's definitely a thing. I wish I knew more about the regional theater of where I grew up to tell you if it was a big thing.
I just didn't know ever where Bucks County was. And I guess it's outside Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I hear
it's like a half hour outside.
Yeah, I hear about Bucks County a lot. I think on like podcasts and stuff. It sounds like a place that like people that live in New York, there's a lot of people like from coastal cities or that live in coastal cities that are from there, because a lot of people grow up outside of Philly and then go to other places from there. And it's probably like I'm guessing
Like Will Smith.
Like Will Smith.
Well, Will Smith is
And
West
Bucks
Philadelphia.
County, Philadelphia, born and raised.
Bucks County, Philadelphia.
No, he's West Philadelphia.
Did you grow up going into Philly and going into New York as a kid?
Well, professionally, I started in Philly, and I was like a full-time film critic before I moved to New York. So I was like the film critic for the South Philly Review, and I ran a newspaper that was in Pennington, New Jersey, that's nearby. And by the time like New York became a possibility, I felt like I had kind of done everything, at least in the editorial world, that I wanted to do in Philly. I have great memories from there. I don't miss sitting in traffic on I-95.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'd like to go back there sometime soon. Yeah.
Will you tell me what sucks about being a film critic? Because on paper, it sounds like the best job that you could ever have.
The pay. I mean,
There it
that's
is.
one thing.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I always did. I mean, we're talking about wearing a lot of hats.
Right.
Like from the beginning, I used to be an art major. I was a graphic design major, but I was always looking at like the full package. And then when I got into writing, it wasn't just like, I wanted to write about movies and be a critic, but I was also an editor.
Yeah.
So I just knew like to make it, you had to wear a lot of hats
Right.
because I mean, the Roger Ebert days were dead. Like when I was still, aspiring film critic guy.
Yeah.
And also it can be kind of isolating. Like if you are just consuming movies and writing about them all the time and you're not living life to bring that sort of lived experience to what you write about, you can kind of end up in this fake cinematic bubble.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you saw both Sex and the City movies.
Yes.
Okay. One better than two?
Yes. Oh, yes.
So we've heard. We haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, I'm not going to give anything away. All I'm going to say is, for me, the first film was kind of like maybe a little indulgent, but a nice little cherry on top of the series. The second one, I just kind of pretend didn't happen.
That seems like what most people say.
Well, that's why it's interesting that it was such big. I guess there are just always now with internet articles looking for something people will click on. So it was like this huge disappointment to find out that Sex and the City 3 wasn't going to happen. But I was like, I don't even know if anyone's clamoring for 3. I feel like they're like, you can't fix it. Just leave it alone and let us have what we have.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of things, one of Hollywood's biggest flaws, I think, is not being able to leave things alone.
Yeah.
Because
Totally.
anything that's like a marketable, recognizable product / brand / title, whatever, it's like, let's make another one. Let's make another one. Let's remake another one. It's like, I was recently really, really sick. Well, actually it was a little while ago, but I was really, really sick. And I am a diehard, like, I'm a very, very impassioned Lord of the Rings film fan.
Yeah.
I liked the first Hobbit movie just because it kind of brought me back into that world.
Yeah.
But when I was sick, I finally got around to watching the last Hobbit movie, and I was just like, why? Why did we do this? And the answer is, it's just, money.
It was
Or
like,
just more franchise. It's just this thin little book got turned
well, like
into
all 3 of those movies made more than all 3 of the Lord of the Rings movies. So it's like,
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah, I mean, it was like automatically we have to turn down making like $1 billion a movie. No, thanks. So it's like, because I agree with you. I watched those movies and had no impact on my life in any way besides like the quick rush of being like Ian McKellen.
Right.
But like, it's like, that whole series is longer than Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. And I
And
felt
you're
like
like-
it felt like it wanted to one up Lord of the Rings, but it's supposed to be leading to it.
Yeah.
So it sort of sucked the air out of it for me a little bit. I was just like, as I pretend that Sex and the City 2 just didn't happen, I kind of would pretend that the Hobbit Battle of the 5 Armies never happened.
Yeah.
I think also we've figured out this thing that, there's certain shows that warrant 20 seasons and 50 episodes a season, like The Simpsons or South Park, that it's like, cool, that world is self-sustaining and can continue on. But like shows like Friends or Seinfeld, those won't really happen again as like cultural things. And I feel like we've settled on, cool, about 5 seasons, about 10 to 12 episodes for a show everyone loves. And that's plenty, you know?
Yeah.
Because it sucks in like British TV where there's like 12 episodes and you're like, come on, there could be a little more. But you know, I don't know. It's tough to find the sweet spot, but I definitely feel like maybe Sex and the City, it seems like the consensus is like the cherry on top was all we needed.
Yeah. And there's something to be said too. And I find myself talking about this often with TV, that I have a lot of respect for TV shows that know when it's time to leave.
Yeah, that's true.
Like it blows my mind that Grey's Anatomy is still on the air.
I just found that out last week that it's still around.
Yeah. And people watch it.
Yeah.
Like it has a huge following still. It's
Tweet
crazy.
at us your angry tweets or Instagram comments if you're one of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Grey's Anatomy lover. Yeah, it's in like season 37 or something.
Something like that. Yeah. How do you feel about British TV shows that are like 6 episodes then we're out and then 6 episodes then we're out, like their seasons?
I mean, British TV, British comedy, they have a very sort of dry way of approaching things that I'm not necessarily talking about episode duration, but I recently binged Killing Eve, the first season, and I watched something else recently. Things that come out of like the BBC is just maybe the tone is a little bit more up my alley.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit adjacent also to some Canadian TV. Like right now I really, really finally caught up with Schitt's Creek.
Oh yeah.
Which is such an excellent show.
Yeah.
It's just so sharp and in these little 21-minute bursts. And similarly, as talking about the lifespan of a show, I recently heard that, you know, the next season, the 6th season is going to be the final season. And I love the show, but I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
These people know how they wanted to end this story.
Yeah, totally.
And I really respected, there was a comment from the Canadian broadcasting company that does it and said how they were in full support of how Dan and Eugene Levy, you know, they envisioned an ending for it in the beginning, and that's how they're letting them end it. They're not trying to squeeze more episodes out of them and to get more money out of them.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, did Sex and the City do that? How did they lay their swords down? Because it seems like the show itself seems to have one of those solid arcs. I don't know about the end, but it seems like they didn't milk it that hard. I don't know.
Yeah, they split the last season into 2, right?
Yeah. That was, I think that was around the time where that was very
The Sopranos
in
did
vogue.
that too.
Yeah, to do that.
Yeah.
Similarly with movies, like
Yeah.
with the
True.
Harry Potter did
the
that.
Harry Potter series and the Twilight series.
That's not totally that bad though, because then it gives you 2 premieres and 2 finales, and like you get a few more extra episodes, but not that much more time, and then just I guess more a season of hype around it. I guess.
Yeah. It sounds like a promotion.
What are they total? 8 seasons?
Sex and the City?
Yeah.
Or maybe 7 because it's 6. Isn't it 6 seasons? But the last one is 2. Is that what it is?
I don't know. We'll have to look.
We'll have to look.
Yeah.
I actually don't remember.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking of which,
It's all there in the pink box. I know.
yeah, we're doing season 4, episode 4. What's sex got to do with it? So we're gonna go watch the episode. Come back. We got lots more to talk about. We'll be back.
all right.
Forward.
Episode 52. What's sex got to do with it? Carrie continues to date her jazz musician, but finds out he has an ADHD problem. Miranda substitutes chocolate for sex. And Charlotte deals with Trey getting a little too overconfident in bed. Samantha tells the girls she is in a relationship with Maria and is now a lesbian. And now, back to the boys.
Welcome back, everybody.
We've had a great night of Sex and the City.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 great
There's been some really
episodes.
great episodes.
This one,
Season 4 is shaping up to be really good, actually. Season 3 was like the roller coaster season. I don't know how much you remember about season 3. It's when you meet Aiden.
Okay.
So there's a lot going on. But season 4 has been solid so
Fantastic.
far.
Fantastic.
super solid. It's simultaneously ironic and good that we have you on the show because they deal with a lot of gay issues on this. So it's good to have you. But then also, it's the most vagina heavy episode ever. So it's like, it's kind of
the irony. Yeah. I definitely remember the Maria arc.
Yeah.
And you're in for some more fun.
Oh, that's good.
Continues. Totally forgot about the female ejaculation scene.
Yeah.
That definitely took me by surprise. I was like,
It took
I think it took
Samantha's
Samantha by surprise as well.
Yeah. I think,
Same joke.
I was about to say that came out of nowhere. But it did not. It did not come out of nowhere.
come on.
Walking in,
Come
you
on.
know, I knew which episode we were going to watch. I was curious to see how the way they talked about Samantha dabbling in queerness, like how that was going to age.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess you could say it's a little on like the homophobic side, but not too much. I think it's more like the girls are just shocked because I mean Samantha's like the capital M man eater.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
exactly.
So
Yeah.
alien to them.
Totally.
Well, it's also that this is kind of the first like relationship that she's been in. They're like, she's in a relationship.
Yeah.
I like
And
that. That's what makes Charlotte like take it seriously.
Oh,
like
of
Charlotte is
course.
like the naysayer,
Yeah.
but she's
Of
like,
course.
oh, she's actually in a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Classic Charlotte.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's I guess I could see it from both ways. There's some things in the show that I'm like, I get it, problematic. This, I could see it from both sides because it doesn't age super well, but there are also still tons of people out there that misunderstand that are just like, you're either gay or you're not.
Yeah.
And I guess instead of it being like, this didn't age well, it's sort of like, well, those women probably still exist that walk around being like, listen, I've never met anybody that is anything besides gay or straight.
Right.
You know?
No, I think I think ultimately I think it's a progressive move for the show.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling that then and I still feel that now. And the way, you know, it's a lesson for Samantha. God, I keep wanting to call Samantha Miranda. It's a lesson in intimacy for Samantha and
totally.
which she's not good at. And meanwhile, you have Carrie with this guy where intimacy is just completely taken out of it.
Yeah.
Which I kind of liked because something I've always liked about this show is how it's just so sex positive for women.
Yeah.
Which of course, you know, everyone knows that. But I got like a rush of a reminder of that with this.
Yeah.
Because she walks into that guy is so much more, well, we come to find, I thought they were going to say he was like a coke addict.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
By how much he was running around and couldn't, but so we find out he's ADD, but just that sort of total disinterest in her at the first encounter with the jazz and everything. And it's like, she's kind of tolerating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then as it evolves, you realize, you know, she is definitely making these choices to just have a hookup that's amazing and mind blowing. That's a quote, just so the listeners know.
You know, it's sort of funny if this came out now and the day after there's like the you know, recap the day after, it would be like the way that they represented like the lesbian arc, a bit problematic, and also a bit problematic that she dumped him just because he's ADD.
I
We're
know.
working with
There would be a thing where they're
You know,
like, we're
'cause-
talking about brain chemistry these days.
I know.
And,
It's like even that part I'm like, oh, that's so funny. I don't think it would be written in the exact same way to
No.
just be like, if someone is ADD, like they're
It's a flaw.
annoying.
It's a
and
flaw
you're-
that I can't live with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, you know,
You mean like it's like a mental illness joke in a way, or like a,
not
or
a mental
like,
illness thing. I just think that
but
would
that's
be
that's what the backlash would be.
Yes.
Perhaps.
I think the backlash would be like, well, we've learned that like ADD gets misdiagnosed and there's ways that people can manage things and like everyone like devices are causing this with people and like and it's also not an accurate portrayal of someone who's actually ADD. It's like a bunch of stuff would get in with that.
Yeah,
It's partially just because nowadays that people are annoying. I'm not
Right,
necessarily
right.
against that because I'm like, listen, I'm probably ADD and a lot of people are annoyed by me.
I'm definitely ADD. I think this episode just kind of came out at a time when ADD was more of like a thing.
Yeah.
Which is not to say it's still it.
But in like
is,
popular
but
culture,
yeah,
I
it was
think.
much more of like a in the zeitgeist
Right.
at the
Yeah.
time. Now,
Especially with
when's
adults.
the last time you heard someone talk
now
about
just
like
everybody has it.
everybody is. Everybody is because everybody has to do 10 million things at once anyway.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Let's quickly do a summary
do a
of the
flyover real
show
quick.
for those that are listening. The theme of the show was what sex got to do with it, and Carrie excuse me, asked the question, what comes first, the chicken or the sex? And she's referring to sex with no relationship, which she had through Carrie and her relationship to Ray, or a relationship with no sex, which was represented by Samantha and Maria, which, eventually changed at the end when they had sex. Charlotte's storyline is she is hooking up with Trey again, and eventually gets frustrated that that's all their relationship has become, kind of a fascination with the fact that his penis is now working because it wasn't before. She gets frustrated with that, decides that he needs to choose. Either he wants to be with her or take it easy about the penis talk. I'm not sure really what. We'll talk about that more.
Okay.
And then lastly was Miranda went on a sex strike and supplemented her sexual desires with chocolate cake. And so that's what sex got to do with it.
Very succinctly summed up.
Good job. Good job.
Can we start with the sex strike?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's
love to start
pretty
with that.
wildly.
Yeah, you all mentioned something like that. I don't know what you were referring to.
Well, essentially, it was over the weekend, I think.
Yeah.
Alyssa Milano, who many people know is like one of the first women to really push the Me Too movement forward in the wake of Georgia's anti-abortion laws that they signed into law. She proposed on social media that women just go on a sex strike, specifically in Georgia, and just not have sex with men. And some people got behind it, but it seemed like the majority of people and the majority of women clapped back saying like, whoa, as if like it shaped something that sex is something that women give to men and that's just the way it is. And there were a lot of tweets like, whoa, this is like the opposite of feminism. You're promoting abstinence, which is actually a really conservative viewpoint.
Right.
And it just, between that and the law itself, I was just like sitting there like, maybe if everyone just played the tape forward just a little bit to kind of think these ideas through before they hit or sign or whatever.
Yeah.
But we just, as a culture in general, don't often do that.
Well, I think there was a lot of interesting takes on it. Let me read because I just pulled it up. It was in CNN. She wrote it. It says why the time is now for a sex strike. Calling for a sex strike as a way to protest restrictions on abortion has sparked a powerful response. And so she says, so now that we have your attention. So she wrote it for, as you said, but what is funny is, does anyone know, play nerd, that this is like from a play from like 3,000 years ago? There's a play called Lysistrata.
No.
It's a Greek play, and all the men are at war killing each other, and like everyone's battling. So the women get together and they do a sex strike, and they won't have sex with their men
On either side.
on either side until they quit the war. And throughout the play, they had on these like strap-ons, and throughout the play, like the guys' dicks would just get harder and harder until the end. Like they just have these rock hard dicks.
How have I not heard about this?
Yeah, there was a Broadway adaptation, a modern day, called Lysistrata Jones, I think.
I definitely know the name.
So yeah, Lysistrata, it's like an old Greek comedy. And so what's sort of funny about her proposing it is like, I think a lot of times things are presented in a way as like creative and new. And I'm not necessarily I doubt she did be like, I just thought of this. But it's just sort of funny because it's like, this is a thing that's been around for a long time. And I think especially now would be the time that it would work the least because of exactly what you said. Anything you bring up milk and you're going to get 50 different responses, and it's going to range from like milk saved my mother's life to like you're abusing cows. And you're like, I just tweeted people should drink milk, So sex is like one of the most powerful things in culture. And so it's fun. I'm not surprised that it didn't go well. And I just wonder if there's anyone out there actually doing it.
I think it was inevitable that somebody with some kind of influence is going to have some kind of radical response to this to many people, very, very problematic and dangerous law. Mm-hmm. Someone's going to do something. We are a reactionary culture. That's what we do now. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, as represented in this episode, to go on a sex strike or something, or to do anything sex related like that, is such a personal, like, act of autonomy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I don't know if you can ever like force or influence people to do anything sexual that is like a jump on the bandwagon kind
Right.
of thing.
Especially because, listen, Alyssa Milano really, she's done a bunch of acting stuff. She was great in her thing as an actor, but I feel like, and great she has been very influential as a activist and stuff.
Mhm.
But, people like Sean Penn and Alyssa Milano, people like that, there's a certain point that's like, that's cool that you're like being politically active and doing that stuff. But the second they tell me to do something, I'm just like, Sean Penn, shut the fuck up. Like,
Yeah.
like, I like your movies. And if I agree with you, yes, but also it's like, she's been an activist for a long time, but I do think it represents like someone who's up there talking and then getting involved in your life in a way that you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I heard. I'm sorry. Well, I heard someone literally say that's that woman that was creepily popping up during the Kavanaugh case. I'm not about to defend Kavanaugh, but
but you're right. She was in the background.
Yeah, she does do these. I'm sure it was well intended, but these sort of curious things where people are like,
Yeah.
I feel like we should make sure we cover everything in the episode, but I heard a really interesting thing that someone said, basically that Rose McGowan was so insane and so punk rock in the way that she represented the Me Too movement, and that Alyssa Milano was like the more moderate version that they've got behind, because Alyssa Milano or Rose McGowan was just too unpredictable. And I was like, that was an interesting take that I saw, that I was like, that when you truly are as punk rock is the only way I can think to describe it.
Because she like shaved her head.
But a true radical.
Yeah.
When you're like, I cannot be controlled, in the same way that like, I don't know, you could think of lots of people like that, like that when a thing gets too big, it has to be controlled in a way that is like, who's the best representative for this? So,
well, I know I've met Rose a few times, and
what?
Yeah, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think she was someone who was a radical, unpredictable figure, and it maybe volatile and problematic at times, but very necessary in that whole movement, scandal, etc. And from what I've seen, it's sort of calmed down to a point where like she really put in the work to really get the word out there, and turns out that most of the things that she said turned out to be true.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can yell at or put down the loud person in the room as much as you want, but when all of the things that they're screaming turn out to be facts. But I see what you're saying. It's like, Alyssa Milano's a little bit safer, but I feel like we're getting away from what sex got to do with it.
Yeah. Well, but it is
weird. It's weird that the sex strike thing is happening right now. And and Miranda's was for personal reasons.
Yeah, I was saying Miranda wasn't trying to get other people.
She was trying to get other people on board
herself.
And I don't want to. And I by no means want to minimize any of the actual political things we're talking about. But there was a Miranda. There was a thing, and it's funny with like how people have gotten behind Miranda and Cynthia Nixon. That her thing in this episode is she was like, I'm going on a sex strike for the way that people are not paying attention to this right now. And I was like, that is spot on so many levels.
Yeah.
So I was actually missing what was the issue that she was striking? Like, what was she upset that people weren't paying attention about?
So that conversation came up when they were talking about Samantha's relationship, right?
Yeah.
At
their first chat
and chew when they were having that. Yeah. And y'all are going to help me out on this. I believe she was saying that because she was like, people aren't communicating. Sex is the way that people are handling sex in relationships is like not healthy. It wasn't as heavy as that.
I thought it was just as simple as she just had been on too many bad dates.
Oh no, that's what it was. She was like, I'm tired of doing.
Yeah,
I'm tired of going out in the world and having this. Yeah, I'm just going to go on a sex strike because conditions are bad now.
Yeah,
like,
give me some Eau Claire's and Jon Stewart.
That was a lot of cake.
Yeah, it was a lot of cake.
Yeah. She ate some eclairs and then just made an entire Betty Crocker cake. The Moist Deluxe.
Yeah, instead of paying $74.50 for
like a nice cake.
So I would love to talk about this episode, but I want to talk specifically more about you and your career and like insights that you've had with sex columns and maybe like some of the stuff that Carrie Bradshaw does in the show. Have you written for or edited a sex column before?
Yes. So at Out magazine, we used to have a sort of sex positive section of the magazine where it could be a submission, it could be, something that we co-mission. But there was a period of about like 2.5 to 3 years where I was very single and I was very on the scene, going out and wanted to write about it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really coming from a Carrie Bradshaw place, but like, of course you make those connections because it's so embedded in the culture.
Right.
I mean, I think it's important to know that one of the brilliant things about this show is that like she is her own test subject.
Yeah.
And that she and her girlfriends give her so much material constantly to write about.
Right.
And you'll notice, if I remember correctly, the column and everything, when she's suddenly not single and things start to get more serious, it's like, she doesn't have as many options to write about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a few. I did one that was about, it was like basically how the word slut, my sort of thesis and my end to the column was basically that the word slut does not exist, in the sense that like what I saw from all different types of specifically gay and queer men that I encountered, there's such a pressure in that community of like how much sex you are having or how much sex you're not having. And also this thing, like I've never used a hookup app. Like even when I was single, I just didn't, not because I'm against it or for or whatever. I just didn't. And that would get different reactions like, oh, good for you. And it's like, no, it's not about that. Or it's like, oh, wow. Like what, then how do you date?
Right.
So I just brought up a lot of different people. Like I knew one person who hadn't had sex in like 2 years. I knew another person who had sex with like more than like 600 guys. I knew another one who was a porn star who's married. And just from my own experience, it was like I could go out with one person one night and one person the next night, or I could go like 3 weeks. And basically it was like however much sex you're having, whatever like feels good to you is what matters, as long as you're like communicative with your partner, et cetera. So that was why, contrasting this sex strike thing between what's happening with Miranda and what someone like Melissa Milano is proposing, it's such an intimate, like personal choice of how much sex you're having. Or like, I understand that the current topic that we're talking about is attached to a much bigger idea.
Right.
When I read her column this morning, I was like, I'm going to join the sex strike and not jerk off. And then by like 2 p.m., after the gym, I got in the shower and then it happened. I was like, fuck, I have to restart it, so.
You're really bad for the movement, Kevin.
But I did another one that was about the person who I knew who had sex with like 700 guys by the time I wrote it.
Yeah.
And just the whole thing about the column was about being sex positive. So, and not being judgmental about whatever it was. So it's like, okay, what does this mean? And there were certain things in the piece that sort of destigmatized STDs in a way that was kind of problematic in the sense of how it was received, of like, you don't want to.
Did he have any STDs?
No. Had a few in the past, but basically it was like, if you get one, like it's not the end of the world. Yeah. Like there are certain STDs that if you get them, it's very, very manageable and very, so, but that's a tricky thing because it's like, you don't want to endorse getting STDs and not having safe sex, but there's also a huge stigma around it. Like you go to the doctor for an STD, you're not historically going to get treated the same than if you had like a cold.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's interesting living in New York with all of the advertisements everywhere on the bus and on the subways about like not trying to normalize. It's like what you're saying, the balance with getting tested for syphilis, or there's on the stop that I'm at, there's a big thing that's like, go get tested for gonorrhea. And it says like, there's like huge gonorrhea outbreak. And I'm like, so there's tons of people getting gonorrhea. I've never spoken to anyone, so I'm sure I know people that have, or with HIV or other things. Like those are all city like city advertisements, usually sponsored by the city. So there must be a room where it's like, we need to try and help people get tested, try and like prevent this, and also not endorse it, but not stigmatize it. All just like trying to have people have a healthy sex life, or like, not have a public health scare.
I was going to say it's also a public health thing too.
Yeah, totally. Well, I love that you talked about people actually sitting down and having a conversation about like the best way to go forward as opposed to maybe doing something reactionary. But another piece that I did that it's one of the pieces that has lasted the longest with me. And I want to add too, I mean, I know this is a show, but it is based on, Candace Bushnell's book of her own experience. It's really hard to write about yourself without, in my experience anyway, without sounding like super navel-gazy, super like arrogant. But when I got out of my last relationship, I found out about the Black Party. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
No.
It's kind of the biggest, longest running, that might not, don't quote me on that. Well, I'll quote it anyway, but it's the most famous / infamous like circuit sex party among like gay queer men in New York City.
Okay.
And when I first heard about it, I thought like that sounds terrifying, because I was in a very sort of heteronormative, like domesticated sort of, either by my ex-partner or by myself, sort of imposed judgment of like other types of gay men, and also just sort of self-identification that maybe wasn't quite accurate. So I heard about it. I was like, that sounds terrifying. I have to go and I have to write about it.
Oh my gosh.
So I did. And I had this really kind of eye-opening experience that I wrote about in detail, and like,
We got to read this.
We have to read this. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. And it was a little scary, but super, super liberating. And like what I came out of it was this kind of very stripped away, the judgment being stripped away, and noticing like, everyone's there for their own reasons. There's not like a typical party goer. And then it published, and then I had to step out of the office and talk my mom down for a half an hour.
Oh my
after it published. And she popped up in another one of the essays too. I forget why. I think it was the slut one, because once I was single, she's like, "Are you a slut now?" Like, and I'm
like, "Mom, didn't you get to the end? It doesn't exist."
Well, it was actually before that, because I went from being like, no, to being like, well, define slut.
To you.
What does it mean to you?
I want to ask you about the sex party, but also I had a joke that I never did, because I was a virgin until I was 30, and I wrote a whole show about it and talked about it, how I lost my virginity. But in it, I had a joke where I'm like, it's really funny. There are people that would be like, that's crazy. But I had a thing that would never turn into a funny thing that was basically like, everybody has their unsaid thing of what they think it's crazy. I've never had sex, but they would find it insane. If somebody said like 20,000, they wouldn't be like, yeah, no number shocks me. It was just like you changed the number in their head. And that was, and so that's like going with your slut conversation. But can we do a quick rundown, ask you some questions about a sex party? I've never met someone who's been to a sex party.
Well, and it's funny because there's another podcast where I just listened to where they were talking about, there's one called NSFW in New York, and it stands for like the new society for something.
Wankas.
The new society for fucking wankas. But it's like, I just heard about another one on a podcast, and I was like, my immediate thought is I was like, one, oh, this happens, and two, eyes wide shut. And so it's like, I think that everyone has pre-existing ideas about that.
Well, the Black Party is definitely not eyes wide shut.
How many people are there?
Thousands.
What?
Oh my gosh.
What?
Where is it?
Yeah.
And first of all, any party with thousands of people, but then you add on the sex party.
Is everyone
thing.
naked?
It's more like, well, it used to be at the Roseland Ballroom before it closed.
Really?
And then when I went was the first year that it was in Brooklyn, and it was in like this big Brooklyn warehouse.
Like in Bushwick or something?
I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
I was too
Yeah.
I was too. I mean, there was a lot of like nerves going. in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of leather harnices.
Okay.
Which I got a little frustrated by because I was like, if I were the creative director of this thing, I would ban leather harnesses and make people get more creative. But in the piece, I compare it to Dante's Inferno because it felt, for at least that was my experience of it. Like as you go in, and there was so much great color. Like it was like there was like those plastic meat locker curtains.
Uh-huh.
So there's just so much, like, it was so rich with metaphor. And I walked up, like, all I had on was like a black coat, and underneath I just had like on these little shorts and not much else. But then I get there's a whole line of people that get fully clothed, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then of course they all take their clothes off and put their harnesses on. And as you walk through, it's like a dance floor, and then you notice a little bit of something happening over to the right. And then as you go deeper in, it would get more and more and more risque, shall we say, to the point that in the all the way back, and then they have like makeshift glory holes up with like one guy on one end, one guy on the other, and then
blowing each other.
Yeah, and then like guys like leaning against the wall, like waiting for somebody, and then other guys like seated on benches, like waiting for somebody.
So dude's waiting on the wall, and then someone just goes up and
yeah, pretty much.
But this is
I mean, if someone chose not to wear a condom, I couldn't really tell, but like they definitely, like, there's baskets of condoms everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, but then there was this one part that was blocked off by like a black, I guess, tarp.
Yeah.
And it was completely black inside. So it was like, for me, it was like the ultimate, like, push yourself kind of thing. So I went in there, and you can't see anything. You just, and things start happening, and I had set my own kind of standards of what what I would and would not allow to happen. And I ended up connecting with somebody who I met once before previously, who became like my sort of mate for the night.
Your shaman.
Which kind of put a nice kind of cap on it for me. But yeah,
that's
wow.
It's so interesting because I'm
feeling a boots on the ground episode, guys.
What is that?
We're three straight guys. We do a podcast.
Boots on.
That's where we like go to like Sex and the City location.
We like take the recorder and we go out of the place.
But I think we got to do the black party now.
The rumor, and I don't know for sure, because after that happened, the joke would always be like, it would come back around again and be like, hey, Kurt, you going again? And I'm like, I'm good. But I think this year might have been the last one.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah, it just happened like 2 months ago. I don't know that for sure, but that's what it kind of sounded like.
Okay.
But yeah, it was an experience, and I'm very grateful for it. And I, even when that the last one, whether it was the final one or just the most recent one, that piece that I wrote started circulating again, like coming up. Because a lot of people, I think, really liked how it took a kind of healthy approach to it. And again, like, destigmatize it, because I think that's so important in culture. And I think it's something that's really important about Sex in the City, especially for women, is like having like a sex positive show about women. Like, and another thing, not to veer to the left or the right or whatever, but I had forgotten how effectively this show balances its narrative among the four characters.
Yeah.
And kind of puts them all in a specific role. I don't know if it happens for everyone, but this one was a really good example, I think, of like having, Miranda be the abstinent one, and putting them in these positions.
There was that montage that went past all four of them.
Yeah.
And it just was showing like Miranda eating cake, Carrie having sex with the jazz musician but not communicating, Samantha and
like
having her intimacy.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that was
Charlotte banging on a mallard.
And Charlotte wanting everything.
Yeah, exactly.
She wanted one thing: John Thomas.
God, I don't think I've ever seen anything with Kyle MacLachlan that I didn't find like super amusing.
Yeah.
Like even Twin Peaks is like, well, I think it's one of the funniest, craziest shows ever. But from Showgirls to Blue Velvet to even Sex and the City, you will never fully take him seriously.
No.
Yeah.
I thought his arc was done. I said this in our last episode. I thought his arc was done, and he's just getting more and more interesting. And it's so funny because I made such a joke about Trey so much, and I'm like, their story has taken such an interesting turn for what you said. Like, finally, she gets what she wants.
Yeah, she seems like she could never I'm convinced more and more that Charlotte has no idea what she really wants.
Yeah.
Because she's like, all I want is marriage. And then she gets it and she's like, oh, wait, my husband can't get hard. All I want is for him to get hard.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I want, like, she just like is constantly chasing this thing that she thinks she wants.
Yeah.
Well,
Charlotte's infuriating.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think she's, ironically enough, for the one who's supposed to be the squeaky clean one.
Yeah.
I love how deeply flawed she still is.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I think that's, and I don't necessarily think they mean to do it, but I think that is like what I notice with a lot of squeaky clean people, and even myself at times, that you're like, like.
Are you saying you're squeaky clean?
Squeaky clean, baby. No, but anything you try and put up barriers around, and then it like just things like squeeze out, and like you act out in these other ways. And I think that's totally true with Charlotte.
Yeah.
She put her like boundaries up so intensely that it's like, I don't necessarily know if you're living freely. You've just like seen the way you think you want something.
Yeah.
You just set it up, which.
Well, she's the most conservative by far.
Yeah.
And she's, the whole thing with, if I remember what you guys probably saw, is like, it was
pretty much Orthodox Jewish. Just fucking schmool all day.
I don't know if you remember, there's an episode in season 1 where she has sex with a Hasidic Jewish art dealer named Shmuel.
Yeah.
Which is just that it's so weird because it's so out of the box for her.
Uh-huh.
But if she was gonna have
But if she was going to end up with a Jewish man, it would be a by the books Jewish man.
Yeah.
Although I don't know. I don't know what happens.
Yeah, there's more to come from Charlotte. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Because you're touching on some things that you have in store for you.
Well, that's how I'm like, okay, I know it's not going to end with her and Trey ending up. I know they're walking back into like the lion's den.
Yeah.
But it'll be a much more satisfying ending to whatever their relationship, how it ends, than if it would have ended the way it did, which is like, he was 2-dimensional, and I feel like he is more 3-dimensional now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was the intimacy was making him impotent, right?
Yeah.
That's basically what it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now that they're basically out of intimacy and just into sex is why he's just can get it up and is like crazed about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But she wants the whole.
But she wants all of it. Yeah.
Okay. We have a few more minutes left, so let's make sure we don't miss anything. We have to talk about vaginas for 4 minutes, and then we'll do the Cosmo.
Okay, cool. We also have to talk about what you mentioned this at the beginning about how it touched on gay issues, but there's just a lot of things of Carrie just throwing out things about, like Miranda says, or they're talking about how Samantha wakes up and realizes she's a lesbian, and then Carrie's like, I'm a fire hydrant then.
Right.
And then at one point she says something like, it's just like trying on shoes. She goes, yeah, like a Birkenstock.
Yeah.
Just, I was waiting for like an Indigo Girls reference or something for her to just throw out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a really good way to acknowledge what I was wondering about how it ages.
Yeah,
because I think one of those jokes still is funny, and lesbians would even still find funny, which is the Birkenstock joke. I think that is kind of funny. But to compare like an orientation to waking up like an object feels like such an archaic, even joke to make.
Yeah.
Like, just like, even if we weren't in like super sensitive era of like reactionary identity politics and all that,
right?
It does feel like a wild oversimplification, even in a humorous way.
And there's no nuance to it at all. Like at least with the Birkenstock thing, you're like, it is kind of a good joke, but there's nothing, or it's like it's a joke that touches on something where you're like, I see what you did there.
I think for the biggest thing, it's a joke that's even beneath Carrie.
Yeah.
Because when she turns around and says like, poof, you're a pimp. Like, that's funny because that's like, that's the sharpness of Carrie's wit.
Yeah.
So that's just maybe, a writing flaw there.
I do think in culture in general, it seems like gay men get a little more nuance than lesbians. Like I think lesbians are so much easier or people allow them to be made fun of way easier, and lesbian culture rather than male gay culture.
Well, lesbian culture in general doesn't get nearly as much attention or play.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say that it's simply because it involves women, you know. The whole like lipstick lesbian thing has totally been fetishized for so long, but like the actual lesbian culture, I know, and or bisexual, or you know, the female queerness is not. I mean, we are seeing more of it now, but it's not nearly as represented as male queerness is, and I think that's just if I had to guess, it's just like a male privilege issue.
Yeah.
And the irony of all of this, of course, is like. The actress in one of the 4 actresses in this show is now one of the most prominent, like visible, outspoken lesbians in the world, Cynthia Nixon.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that says about it or anything, but
it's crazy watching all that happen now with her walking with Carrie while they're like making the jokes and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh, this is actually going on behind the scenes kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Now I will say this last thing. I did not know puseta. I didn't know the word, but it's definitely in my vocabulary now.
Yeah.
I forgot about it.
But no, that's all.
Well, I think
puseta.
it's not odd that you bring it up because this arc with Maria and Samantha is definitely one of the more memorable chapters of Samantha's adventures.
Totally.
Like it definitely stands out in like the history of the series as being like a moment.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
other than the guy who had a small wiener, like she hasn't spent 2 episodes with the same guy, has she? Like so far?
No, she had the guy from the
with the
first
small
season
ones
that
and then
went
the guy
in.
with the big one.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mr. Too Big and then
But Mr. Too Big was only 1 episode, I think.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
I like
But-
she hasn't really had much of a relationship, which is nice to see
So
her.
far as
Yeah.
we've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I think she doesn't. She doesn't later.
I think she
episodes,
will
but-
later, but yeah, you're right. This seems like this is like a big moment for her in so many ways.
Yeah.
Well, we at the end of each episode we do give the episode a Cosmo rating. You can do half Cosmos and quarter Cosmos, and
Quarter Cosmo.
yes,
Quarter
we
Cosmo,
haven't thrown out a quarter Cosmo. Maybe we.
Yeah, I think we
Maybe
have.
a few.
I'll drop a quarter Cosmo.
But we'll do ours first. You've seen the whole series. Go with your flow.
We'll do ours, and you can think about yours.
And then we're just going to give a brief overview of why you gave it that rating. And I would say, guys, do you have yours?
I got mine.
Yeah, I just came up with mine.
Okay. In 5, 4, 3, 2,
3.75.
Oh, I went
4.0?
4.0.
4.0. Go ahead.
Yeah, I like this episode. I think there was like we didn't. I feel like we didn't spend a ton of time talking about the episode, which was great because we had so much other interesting stuff to talk about.
Listen, if anytime we can talk about a queer sex party, anyone's like, listen, we'll talk about
Just give me a call.
I 100% agree with you.
Thousands of people at a party like that. We're going to talk about that.
I really liked this episode. I like anytime there's a departure from like the monotony of Carrie and Big bouncing back and forth to each other. It's like
Good point.
refreshing. And so like seeing her with someone else and seeing her react to someone else and like was really nice to see. I loved where Trey and Charlotte are at. Like I'm super annoyed by Charlotte, but like at least there's like some emotion there, which is great. Yeah. Seeing Samantha committed is fantastic. And I thought it was great that Miranda didn't have a guy. She was dealing with eating cake. So like it wasn't like the funniest episode that I've ever seen, but there was a lot of good moments, great montage, and a really good chat and chew.
Yeah.
Solid episode 4.0.
Yeah. 3.75. I thought it was really good. I thought it was like a good normal episode. Like I think season 3 was full of tons of awesome episodes. This was just like a great, it wasn't even average. It was like above average, but it was really good. And I also think like the Cynthia Nixon, the Miranda storyline where she's just eating cake. It was it was like kind of low stakes, but she was really funny in it. Like when she creeped back around the
When
corner
she
and got the
peeked
cake out of the
behind
trash.
yeah, that was
It
hilarious.
was so funny. And that
Covered it in palm olive.
yeah, exactly. She wouldn't eat anymore. And I do think and like it is cool to see Carrie with just a random dude who you see some resolution. There was a moment where she was kind of like, I'm just going to have sex with this dude and have fun for a little while. And then she was like, I can't do this because he was like nutty. So
He's playing the banjo.
He's playing the
Couldn't
banjo.
even get her water.
Yeah.
I got distracted.
Yeah, couldn't even get a water. So yeah, 3.75.
I gave it a 3.5, but a strong 3.5 because I feel like if this were in season 1, it would have been executed as like, that was a good 2.5. This was like everything that is good about season 1. And the odd thing is like the only person that kind of has a longer story arc is Charlotte. So usually in season 1, like she'd get the least. So she had sort of the meatiest story arc, and then everything else was sort of like, I don't know, seemed like not singular episode, but close to that. I don't know. I really liked it. I thought it was great. I liked the cake thing, was a nice pepper on top, and I'm glad that Craig Bierko is not going to be in a bunch because that character was kind of inconsistent. Now that I look at season 1, episode 1 and 2, the first one, like he showed no signs of
Being
ADD, and then but yeah, 3.5, super enjoyable.
Also, we don't have time to touch on it, but there was a whole thing about female ejaculation that I feel like that had to spur and start so many
Conversations.
Conversations,
Totally.
yeah, especially back then.
This is the first time we've ever had an actual qualified person give a rating.
true.
It's the first time we've had a real film critic give a rating on a score.
Oh,
I'm excited.
the pressure.
Actually true, yeah.
So it's out of 4, yes?
Out of
Out of
5.
five.
Oh, it's out of 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so you can give it a little more thought if you want.
No, I think I'm also going to give it a 3.75.
Okay.
That's gonna feel so good.
It
Cory.
makes me feel great.
Some lost points for some of the dated jokes that we discussed that just feel like, even at the time, I think, like I said, it's just sort of beneath the wit of the character of Carrie, let alone like the political correctness of it or whatnot. But like I said, I think it's not an episode that's really going to necessarily change your life. However, it really does shift the perspective or the trajectory of Samantha's character. It definitely did raise a lot of conversation with the female ejaculation thing, and even educated me, even if in like a subtle way, about like more about the vagina, et cetera, things like that. And as I had mentioned, it really is a nice example of balancing out very evenly and very true to form, despite what I said about the Carrie's jokes, very true to form each character. Like Miranda is always a character who has a lot of autonomy and really holds that close to her chest. And in this one, it's just her and the cake. And she's, even if it's a bad decision, it's hers.
Yeah.
Samantha's in new territory. Carrie's just having a hookup that good, bad, and different is... I agree with you. It's a good point to say. I'm glad that I didn't come for a big episode, meaning Mr. Big, because that's such a push and pull throughout the entire series, and this is a departure from it. And you get to see the flaws in Charlotte too. So it was a really great immersion for me, who hasn't watched the show in so long, to come back and to see it and to feel that world and talk about it. So yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Kurt.
Yeah, thanks so
Yeah,
much.
thanks so much. This was so much fun.
Where can people find out more about you?
You can find more about me at my website. It's www.rkurtosenlund.com. Should I spell it?
Yeah.
Yeah, spell it.
Well, it's www.rkurtosenlund.com. And on all social, it's the same. It's at RKURTOSENLUND. Yeah. That's me.
And we'll tag you in that stuff on Instagram so that people can go check out your feed and all your work and your writing and everything.
Yeah.
And follow us on Instagram.
We will repost that. Can we repost that piece on the Black Party too that you were talking about?
Absolutely, yeah. That'd be great.
That'd be awesome.
We'll post some of your pieces. Thank you guys so much. Rate and review us. We got 2 ratings and 1 review, but we have like 1,000 more listeners than we do ratings and reviews. So some of you, just kidding. So get on if you can. Do it right now. It means a lot to us, and I feel like we're getting some real momentum with listeners. So tell a friend, and we have some insane guests coming up.
That's right.
So thank you guys so much.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
The Bradshaw Boys stars Cory Cavin, Jon Sieber, and Kevin James Doyle. The show is produced by Jeremy L. Balon. For more information on the guys, check out their website at bradshawboys.com, on social media at The Bradshaw Boys. And if you see them in the street, tip your glass. Thanks for listening.